Friends, how are you today? It is Miss Kirk coming to you from the frigid Tennessee. We are here in absolutely freezing weather after our heat burst and an earthquake, but I am super excited about being able to talk to you about the argument FRQ. So, how are you doing today? Can you give me a thumbs up? Are you super excited to be with me here? Little message in the chat. So I really appreciate you being here with us. I know that many of you had the day off, and so yay. So I'm super excited that you are here with me as we look at FRQ3, the argument question. So we're going to overview sort of what those expectations of the argument portion are, and then look at some model introduction paragraphs so that we can get started. So in the chat, what are you thinking? How do you feel about the FRQ3? What are your thoughts about the FRQ? Any thoughts for me there? Okay, while you're gathering your thoughts and putting your ideas in, let's look at our social media. So if you are not following us at Fiveable, you should be. So go ahead on over and follow that in. Not right now, of course, because you're here with me with the stream. But as soon as it's over, I'll give you a reminder, and you can follow us at Fiveable and then me, myself, as well. So coming soon, we are back on the schedule for semester 2, and we're looking at argument. So on the 27th, you're going to look at the body paragraphs. Rolling around to February, we're going to move into conclusions, which are pretty important, believe it or not. And then we're going to move to the rhetorical analysis multiple choice questions on February 10th, and then the composition questions on 17th. And remember, those are the new questions that were added in, and they focus on, I think the AP phrase is thinking like a writer. So everyone's excited, right? After this, we're going to do a little visitation into the synthesis essay. So you do want to make sure that you are following us and you can get these connections as we go along. So let's look at tonight. We're going to review our learning intention, and then we're going to go into the expectations of the argument question itself. We're going to look at how you break down the prompt and use that Toby method that we talked about with rhetorical analysis. And then we're going to view some model introduction paragraphs. So I see your thoughts. Argument is a lot easier than rhetorical analysis, but I struggle to come up with evidence to reference in my essays. So one thing that I think is very important with argument is in speaking with other AP language teachers, our students are always the most confident in argument because you get to come up with your own claim, your own position, and your own evidence. But what we tend to see is that our students actually score a little bit lower in argument, and we don't always get to see what the student actually writes in their essay. So sometimes we're kind of like, what in the world happened? And in looking at what our students report in their personal reflections, what are their biggest challenges, and then in the practice of the argument question in class is that we see our students take an emotional reaction and write in that way. So we want to make sure that when we're building our argument, we're not hitting that emotional chord, even though we know that we're going to have controversial topics. So absolutely, the structure and logistics are very helpful in rhetorical analysis as well, but we're going to look at some structures with argument that can kind of help you as well. So for example, are you familiar with the Toolman argument? Can you give me a little thumbs up if your teachers are using Toolman? Thumbs down. Okay, that's cool. It's not that big a deal. We're going to look at the main parts of what that argument structure looks like. Okay. Never heard of it. We will definitely briefly go over that tonight. I didn't bring that in for a huge part of it, but basically what the Toolman model does is it was a structure for analyzing an existing argument, looking at claims and evidence, and pulling it in together. However, you can also use it to plan an argument and construct one. Another thing is, what about the classical structure of argumentation? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, we got that. Woohoo! All right. So let's look at what this looks like for tonight. Our learning intention is that through the study of argumentation, I will be able to analyze the FRQ3 prompt and write an introduction paragraph with a defensible thesis. Now, I'm going to highlight that because it's your first point on the rubric. So let's make sure we get it. So our success criteria, you will know that you are able to do this when you can break down the argument to create a plan, when you can evaluate the claim that you're expected to create and identify evidence to support this claim, and when you can write a thorough introduction paragraph that has a defensible thesis statement. So these are what you are looking for when you're demonstrating mastery of tonight's learning intention. So let's get started, shall we? All right. The first thing is your goals. If you know where you're going and you know how you're going to be judged, I'm a firm believer that you're going to be able to make it there. So when we look at our expectations, the first thing that we want to do is consult the source. So in the 2020 CED, we are looking at the basics of argument. So first, you want to make sure that you have a claim. The claim is the specific proposition of a writer. Okay, so it's what you are trying to prove. Now, sometimes that's made directly and sometimes it's made indirectly. I personally have recommended all of my students, and every Fiveable stream I've done about this, I've recommended that is very direct in your writing. Next would be the evidence. That's going to be the facts or the interpretation or the explanations that you use that support whatever your primary claim is, your position statement, if you will. Next is going to be commentary. Excuse me. You have to provide a direct link back to your key point. Now, this is super important because one thing that I see is oftentimes students will have a great claim. They'll have a great piece of evidence, but they miss the commentary that links it back to the key point. So you want to make sure that you have that. Next is going to be the objections or the counter argument, if you will. When you know the main points of the opposition, you're going to be able to effectively shut it down. With the counter argument, you can, of course, concede, yes, this part's true, but, or you can refute, this is completely wrong because. So those are good ways to kind of strengthen the quality of your argument. Next would be your conclusion. That's going to be the end of the argument. Sometimes it's got like a restatement of the claim. Sometimes it's got a summary of the main points. It's got a logical generalization. But this is going to be the piece where you try to motivate the reader to act. Okay? So, moving right along. When you are looking at the CED, the free response question 3 presents students with a literary or rhetorical concept or an idea. Okay, so this is taken directly from it because, again, if we know what they expect of us, we can achieve that goal. So respond to the prompt with a thesis that presents a defensible position. Next, provide evidence to support your line of reasoning. Then explain how the evidence supports that line of reasoning. And of course, use appropriate grammar and punctuation in communicating it. So the big idea here of what we're looking at is that you have to have a defensible position. Now, if you are a higher level writer and you feel like you can qualify, then I suggest you do it. However, if you're looking at argument and you're not really sure about what qualification is or how to qualify in a manner that you still have a defensible position, then I would recommend you not. Because the worst thing you can do is present an argument in which you're like, well, it's kind of sometimes true and sometimes not true. So the next thing I want to highlight would be the use of a line of reasoning. So the line of reasoning is about the logical way that you move from your claim to that end result, to that audience movement. And sometimes what you see is this is the first reason, this is the second reason, this is the third reason. But another way that you can really look at it is the way that these reasons build together. So this is reason 1, it builds with reason 2, it builds with reasons 3. So instead of having like 3 separate ideas, you see the way those 3 work together. So that's what you want to look for with your line of reasoning. Questions so far? Okay, so all argument essay questions are worded in a similar way now, and this is what is called the stable prompt wording, okay? So you're going to have like the discussion, introduction, or quotations in the background in the first paragraph, and then the second one is to write an essay that argues your position on, and then it's going to tell you what to do. So by looking at what the formal prompt should look like, it's going to help you be a little bit more clear in what you're writing. So, are you guys familiar with batting the prompt? Can you give me a thumbs up on that? whatever your tool is to analyze the prompt. Do you have one? Excellent. It's super important that you analyze the prompt. And so we're going to look at how that might look in just a few minutes. First, I wanted to make sure that you have the rubric. So if you go to the Fiveable events page, you should have what that looks like so that you can access the rubric in terms of the single page rubric. So what we have here is the single page rubric. It's nice because you have your requirements for thesis. So that's row A. Of course, that's 0 or 1. And we're highlighting that one tonight because we're working on the introduction paragraph. Next week, it's going to be looking at the body paragraph. So that's going to be your row B, evidence and commentary. And so you can see that is up to 4 points there. And then row C is sophistication, which I think is important to link to tonight as well, because the introduction can be a really good place to set your style and to set your voice so that you can bring in some of these extra pieces. So when we're looking at the thesis statement, I did want to kind of highlight what that looks like in terms of the scoring notes. So AP does provide us with the specific notes. So you can see decision rules and scoring. A 1 point is that you respond to the prompt with a thesis that presents a defensible position. And then you can see typical responses that earn this point, respond to the prompt rather than just restating or rephrasing it. And that the thesis clearly takes a position rather than just stating that there are some pros and cons. So a couple of little things that I think are important to highlight is that, first of all, it says it can be more than one sentence, provided that they are in close proximity. So right next to each other is what I would say. And then, of course, they can be anywhere within the response. If you look at some of the model student responses, there's a student who gets credit for the thesis statement, even though in the scoring notes it says, although the thesis does not appear until paragraph 4. So I think if you present yours earlier on in the introduction, as it should be, you're going to set your reader up to understand you a little bit better. Of course, the one that I just referenced that doesn't explain that thesis statement until paragraph 4, do you think they got sophistication? Probably not, right? Okay, so then, of course, it says that it may establish a line of reasoning, but it doesn't have to do that. And then it says that it notes that a thesis statement can meet the criteria and get the thesis point even if the rest of your essay doesn't support that line of reasoning that you established. So you can at least get the 1 point if you just do what you're expected to do. So does that sound doable? Excellent. So our first thing that we want to look at is your ability to look at the prompt and create a plan. So are you guys familiar with Toby? Can I get a thumbs up on the Toby system? Anybody familiar with Toby? All right, you're going to have to go back in our Fiveable archives because we definitely talk about the Toby structure. And guess what? We're going to do it tonight too. I got you. I got you. What I love about Toby is that when you're creating a plan, you're probably not going to write a full sentence outline on the exam. After all, you've got 40 minutes. That's it, 40 minutes per essay. And then let's say on the synthesis, you took a little bit extra. And on the rhetorical analysis, you took a little bit extra. And now, oh no, you've only got 23 minutes to write your argument. So having that plan based on your prompt is going to be a huge help for actually writing what it looks like. And Toby is a great way to do that. So we're going to look at this prompt, give you just a moment to look through it. This is our 2018 prompt. It's a beautiful quote, don't you think? Okay, now how many of you just heard Into the Unknown? Regardless of the version, you just went there, right? I totally went there too. So I'm actually gonna play the song when I'm doing this with my students. But here's the deal for tonight. So when we look at this, what we can see with our stable prompt wording is that the first paragraph that you're looking at tells us what that background is. It gives us an introduction to our topic. So we can recognize that there's a book and the title doesn't necessarily matter, but we can move on. We've got our author and then her conclusion or her ideologies. We tend not to choose the unknown, which might be a shock or a disappointment or simply a little difficult to cope with. And yet it is the unknown with all its disappointments and surprises that is the most enriching. So we see her position. She says, yes, The unknown is an amazing thing, and it's very enriching. But that second paragraph is going to be the part that tells you what you're supposed to do. So you're supposed to consider the value placed on choosing the unknown and write an essay in which you develop your own position on the value of exploring the unknown. Highlight that, the value of exploring the unknown. So what this is asking you is, what do you think? Do you think there's any value in exploring the unknown? So general process would be to bat the prompt. So that's going to be to look at your prompt for background, for their advice, and for the task. And it's important to focus on the advice that they give you, because although it may not be much, in some prompts, it can be a lot. And if that's who is grading your essay and they are telling you to do something, the smart move is to do it, right? So you can identify the verbs and then create questions and then answer those questions in your mind and in like little bullet notes on the side. That's going to help you to create a working thesis. So how do you feel about the value of exploring the unknown? What do you think? Anybody want to try a thesis statement in the chat? With that, you want to use REHUGO Evidence. Now, REHUGO is just an acronym that we're going to use, and we're going to go over it tonight. And some of your teachers may use that one, and some may use Gopher or Go See It or whatever other acronym they have. But it's pretty much the same places that you can pull your evidence from. And then, of course, you're going to write your essay, and then you want to review and revise. But you only have 40 minutes if your pacing is like totally on point. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for that. So here is a suggested timeline. This is what I look at in my class with my students, and I think it's a pretty valid tool for you to use as well. Obviously, you're going to have to figure out what works for you and what you are capable of, and then you would shave time off wherever you can shave a little time off. So spend about 6 minutes with your prompt and your plan, and we're going to look at Toby on that here in a little bit. And then 7 minutes on your introduction paragraph. This is a great place to get your thesis point, but also to set the tone and to set the stage for that sophistication. So you want to make sure that your introduction does everything that a proper and formal and college level introduction paragraph does. From there, you want to spend about 20 minutes looking at your body paragraphs. I would say a minimum of 2. More is great, but at least have 2, because you know that MLA says at least 2 pieces. Every A has a B, every one has a 2. 3 if you've got the time, or if you're going to address the opposition or the counter in your body paragraphs, you could also do that. And then, of course, 5 minutes on your conclusion and 2 minutes to proofread and revise. So, questions so far on that general process or the timeline? Anything at all? Okay, here we go. Just a little bit more of a look at it. Oops. To show you that yet. All right, so what is REHUGO? So REHUGO is a way of gathering support. It's the evidence that you're going to use, and it needs to be rational and logical, not emotional, okay? Not emotional. It should be objective, not biased. And I think that this is an important element to highlight, because if we look back to the artifice prompt, are you familiar with that? Have you done that one? The art of artifice. Well, that one came out in a very, very heated political election campaigning season. And so with that particular one, some of our students came back and they were telling us, oh, you know what? We talked about the political voting. We talked about Hillary, and we talked about Trump. And that's great if you want to do those things. But if you're going to go off down this emotional element, or if you're going to present logical fallacy, then you're not going to meet the expectation of what your evidence should be. Now, Ms. Kirk, we're looking at introduction paragraphs tonight, not evidence. I hear you. I do. But if you know what evidence you're going to use in that plan, you're going to be able to better plan that thesis statement and better plan your introduction, because you're going to know what you need to include to move it forward. So what is REHUGO? So do your little screenshot. All right, here you go. Here you can pull evidence from something that you have read, from entertainment and the arts, from history, universal truths, government, and observations and experiences. Okay, you got it? We're going to play with this here in just a minute. Are you ready? Okay. Now, Here is a screenshot from this exact same prompt, and you can recognize the highlighting in the blue and then the writing in black. So I think that I'm going to kind of let you know with this for the second semester, what you have to use on the AP exam is you can use a pencil for your multiple choice and then blue or black ink for writing the essay. So I would encourage you right now, as you start like kind of focusing your skill level, stop with the colorful highlighters. Like a piece of me dies when I tell you that. But if you are expecting to use a highlighter and you use that as your crutch because you always use yellow for diction and you always use pink for whatever it is, that's not really going to help you here. And it's not going to help you on that actual test because you don't get to use highlighters there. You get your pencil and your blue or black pen. So that's 3 things that you can still use to help you out. So if we look here, you can kind of see it is the unknown with all of its disappointments and surprises that is the most enriching. This person, in annotating the prompt, has identified what the claim is that's being taken. And then they're looking at the task. Consider the value placed on choosing the unknown and develop your own position on the value of exploring the unknown. So this person has identified a task. What is the value of exploring the unknown? Then the clear connection to REHUGO down the side. They were looking for what they could go with. So you can see R, this person didn't really have anything. E, entertainment, they went with Frozen. And then, of course, H is that historical element. This person went with Christopher Columbus. And U, universal truth, is reaching for the stars. G, government, they went with the founding fathers. And then O, personal experience, taking the AP course. Now, when you do this type of plan and you identify what you're going to use for your evidence, you've got to make sure that you can connect this back to what your claim is going to be. So what do you think, based on the evidence, this claim is going to be? Are these examples of people who benefited greatly from exploring, or maybe not greatly, but benefited from exploring the unknown? Or are these examples of things that were failures with the unknown? What do you think? Absolutely. Benefit. So you can clearly see the thesis statement this person is going to work with just based on their plan, right? So here you have it. Now, with the Toby aspect, remember that T is your thesis. So you can clearly see right here this use of the thesis. Reaching for the unknown is what has created the opportunities that continue to positively advance society. Okay? Clear thesis. And then my O is to just kind of outline my argument. If you look over here, we've got body paragraph 1. Looks like they're going to look at the personal experience, go with a little anecdote here. And then body paragraph 2 looks like they're going to talk about historical elements, the government with the founding fathers, Christopher Columbus. They're going to go with those. Note this, Frozen is going to be in the introduction and Reaching for the Stars is going to be in the introduction paragraph. So this person has gone through and planned, but not only did they create this little outline, but they planned, hey, this piece of evidence would make my introduction stronger. And this piece of evidence would make my introduction stronger. So they've got extra sources that they can pull from and brought it up. Note down here, this person has also kind of outlined the counter they're going to use. Failures, it specifically says common cold and then flu, and then you got the little arrow to AIDS and cancer. So you can kind of see, looking at treatment, perhaps the failures of the unknown, like we can't cure the common cold or we can't cure the flu, but this person's going to write about maybe the benefit that exploring the unknown has had with AIDS and with cancer. You can also see the reference to the challenger listed here. And then note a little quote here, reach for the stars and fall short. Do you guys remember that speech? So you can clearly see the connection here. So you got your thesis, that's your T. You got your outline, that's your O. And you got your BI, your big idea, okay? So the big idea, typically you're going to put in the conclusion of your paper. And this is going to be something that helps to make a connection moving forward. So here we have, unknown may have some negative side effects, but the benefits that continue to improve the human experience are worth it. Clearly states that position. It comes right back and states that position, but it doesn't repeat it. It's not using restatement. It's not the exact repetition. It's by looking at it through restatement. It's not saying the exact same thing, so it's not boring. But even if this person doesn't have time for a full conclusion, writing this big idea down there kind of wraps it up. So, are you with me still? Do you think you could create this kind of an outline for a prompt? I bet you could. Okay, so the function of with some practice, and I'm really glad that you said that, because practice is going to be how you get there with anything at all. So every time that you have this expectation, whether it's in class or on your own, you're building the arguments to kind of practice what that looks like, then you can continue to practice the Toby structure there. So again, it's Toby is that T is going to be your thesis statement, O is a brief outline, and BI is that big idea. Your outline, I'm going to go back to this just so we can look at it for a second while I recap. With this outline, I want you to notice there's not a full sentence outline. It's pretty much bulleted notes. We might not know exactly from looking at this what is the commentary that's going to be used to link the founding fathers to this idea of exploring the unknown, and we might not know what that idea is that's going to link Christopher Columbus, but we can kind of see where they're going with, because those are examples that we are familiar with, and we can kind of see what that's going to look like. But this is enough of an outline that if it's mine and I'm writing this and all of a sudden I look at the clock and realize I've got 12 minutes left and I'm freaking out and I just forgot my train of thought, I can use this Toby to help me come back to it. And if I look up and I realize I got 2 minutes left and I don't have a conclusion, I can draw like a little line with an arrow and then just put my big idea down there. And that just communicates, hey, I wasn't done here, but this is how it would end. And I think that's a good strategy that you can use as well. All right, so the function of the introduction paragraph. Sophisticated essays are going to be a little bit more unique in achieving the goal of logical argument. So the introduction is, again, that first step in the process. So if you look at it, you want to set the tone for the essay. You want to clearly introduce your topic, and you want to clearly state whatever your position is on the topic. So 3 big goals for one little paragraph, okay? Set the tone for the essay, clearly introduce the topic, and clearly state the writer's position. Anybody have any other thoughts on what the function of the introduction paragraph is? No thoughts on that? Okay, so let's look at some model paragraphs. Are you with me? Okay, sample introduction A. There are lots of places in the world that are untouched by mankind, islands gone unexplored, all the way to the bottom of the ocean, which is unknown when it will be explored. Although some people tend to not chase the unknown to explore, it would be beneficial for them to do so, because there is a whole world outside their window, and no one can ever know if there is something better in life if they never explore in order to find it. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you think this is going to get the point for the thesis statement. Like, does this meet the goal, or does it achieve the functions of the introduction paragraph, and does it get that thesis statement? What do you think? Thoughts on that? Think so? Well, let's look at it and let's analyze what this paragraph does, okay? So it starts out with a seemingly unrelated scenario. There are a lot of places in the world that are untouched by mankind. There are items that have gone unexplored all the way to the bottom of the ocean. So we do have this concept of things that are unexplored, but we don't know for sure what they're talking about, because remember, my prompt is the value of the unknown, right? So the next thing it does is it transitions to this idea of the unknown as beneficial, which is unknown when it will be explored. It would be beneficial for them to do so. One can never know if there's something better in life if they never explore in order to find it. So you're able to take these specific pieces and see that transition from the little scenario at the top. It sort of looked like it was unrelated, but these pieces kind of bring it together. Now, bonus points, it addresses the counter. Although some people tend to not chase the unknown to explore, by addressing that other idea in this format, it has shut it down from the beginning. It's almost like you're like, yes, although there are some people who choose not to do this, it would be beneficial for them to do so. They're wrong. It's beneficial to do this. So my position is very clear, and I'm ready to move on to my next paragraph. Questions about sample introduction A? Okay, it does get the thesis point in this example. All right, sample introduction B. Are you ready? Read it just for a second, look over it, read it, and give me a thumbs up if you think sample B gets the point. Does sample B get the point? It does. And my little outline down there at the bottom kind of tipped you off to it. Ignorance is bliss is a quote I have heard several times throughout my life. At first, I never really understood the purpose of the quote. However, I've come to realize that perhaps the unknown should remain unknown. Discovering things we don't know is not always a good thing. It's costly, time-consuming, and even harmful to development of humankind. You can tell in sample introduction B, this person starts with a universally accepted idea. So that's part of that REHUGO that we see. Ignorance is bliss. They're going to go with that, okay? And then it transitions into an anecdote. At first, I never understood it. However, I have come to realize that perhaps the unknown should remain unknown. You can see that this is going to go in contrast to the ideas presented in the prompt, but the next sentence it kind of reiterates, and then it moves down into telling me exactly what the evidence is going to be. So, of course, it's going to get my thesis statement. What is unknown should be left unknown. Discovering things we don't know is not always a good thing. And then the next piece is it's going to talk about cost, it's going to talk about being time-consuming, and it's going to talk about being harmful to the development of humankind. Note, when you're looking at the line of reasoning, this right here sort of approaches that. I can see that we're going to transition from idea 1, the cost, to idea 2, time consumption, to idea 3, the harmful aspects of it. So you can start to see kind of a line of reasoning here. So, are you with me still? All right. Here we are, sample C. The unknown is a concept of crippling anxiety of many. There is fear in the unfamiliar, the possibility of failure, of danger, or embarrassment. In a contrasting way, author describes the disappointments and surprises of the unfamiliar, the failures and the unexpected moments that are the most fulfilling. In this sense, she is absolutely correct. The exploration of the unknown has led to unprecedented scientific development, cultural development, and personal development alike. Now, I'm going to highlight that this is actual sample papers that College Board has released to you all. And I can kind of make sure that you have all of these links too when I send out my follow-up email. But note that there are a few little errors in there. And those little errors are because it's exactly the way that the student submitted it. So you can see there, I didn't change anything. It's just taken and put on here. Okay. So it starts out with a claim of fact. Now, remember, a claim of fact doesn't necessarily mean that it is 100% true. It just means that it's presented as though it is true. Okay. So the unknown is a concept of crippling anxiety of many. It sounds like it's a fact. It's already looking at this idea of what is the unknown, and then it's kind of moving on. It's going to explain the idea in the next sentence. There is fear in the unfamiliar, the possibility of failure, of danger, or embarrassment. So we can kind of see that those are the opposition that she's going to face, or this person is going to face in writing the paper, okay? So, and then we bring in this quotation mark. We've pulled in the specific piece from outside, disappointments and surprises, and then the most fulfilling. So we are able to see that this particular person in their introduction paragraph is showing thorough understanding of the prompt and of the ideas presented in the prompt. And then it moves on. The exploration of the unknown has led to unprecedented scientific development, cultural development, and personal development alike. When it says she is absolutely correct, this is a pretty good example of a thesis statement that is not directly stated. It doesn't come out and say, you know, I am 100% in support of exploring the unknown. And instead of hitting that aspect, it just says she is absolutely correct. So it's showing mastery of what that prompt is and what the expectations of the prompt are. And then it's moving in direction of these are the things I'm going to use as evidence: the scientific development, cultural development, and personal development alike. Now, I am going to highlight here because this is a problem that I see often in student writing, and it's such an easy fix. When you do this, what order would these paragraphs be? What order do you think they would be? Can you tell me in the chat? So if my thesis statement, that second sentence of my thesis statement says that I'm going to talk about scientific development, cultural development, and personal development, what is the order that my paragraph should be in? Yep, the same as the thesis. So the first paragraph would be the scientific development, the second one would be cultural, and the next one would be personal. Now, you can look at those pieces, and then I would challenge you as you write to think not only about how they function as three separate ideas, but I would challenge you to think about how they connect. So if I'm thinking about how this progresses, my thought would be if I talk about that personal development first, then I can talk about it at an individual level. And then as it moves to cultural development and into the scientific world, I'm able to change my line of reasoning just a little bit so that I'm showing the intricacies that build them together. I can link the personal to the culture. I can link the culture to that scientific development. And then I can talk about the benefits of exploring the unknown overall as a big picture. So that is my next one. So the question becomes, what is the roadmap? Like, what am I supposed to do? How do I do this? Now, when we're looking at what do we do and how do we get these points that we need, I think it's important for you to, number one, recognize what your teacher, your person in the room is helping you to do. And then, of course, the more that you practice, number two would be find out what works for you. Okay. When you're finding out what works for you, that might mean that you go to some of the events from the past or the questions from the past, read through it, come up with your own little Toby outline, and then look at some of those sample essays and see if you can identify their Toby, because it should be in the paper. It's also going to help you because I feel like we have so many examples of bad writing in the world. It's helpful to look at examples of good writing. So if you go through and you look at what good writing is, then that can be a huge help for you in the long run. So the question becomes, okay, Ms. Kirk, what in the world am I going to do? All right. If you're short on time for your introduction paragraph, just give the clear thesis statement. Just say, there is great value in exploring the unknown. Okay. Now, obviously, that's very simplistic. That's not going to do very much to help you out with what sophistication is going to look like. But the majority of your points are going to come from evidence and commentary anyway. So if you're running short on time, give a very clear thesis statement, ideally one that kind of hints at what your evidence is going to be, and then move on. Deal? Okay. Now, if you've got plenty of time, and you practice this process over and over and over again, and you've really put effort into your Tobys, then here's what we recommend you do, okay? First of all, start with a creative opening. You have an idea, even if that connection isn't 100% clear at first. So like if you go back to some of our others, that connection maybe wasn't so clear at the beginning, but you are able to see this creative idea. The unknown is a concept of crippling anxiety for many. And then it explains it. There's fear in the unfamiliar, the possibility of failure, of danger, or embarrassment. Okay? So our next idea that we talk about is the bridge. The bridge is going to use the language in the prompt to transition your idea to the topic. And some people use like this reverse, like this funnel action, like you start out with this broad statement and then you kind of narrow it down. Note this example, which of course is from the released student samples. It does that exact same thing. It funnels it down a little bit more, the bridge. In a contrasting way, the author describes the disappointments and surprises of the unfamiliar and the failures and the unexpected moments that are the most fulfilling. And then it brings it down a little bit more and it lets us know where we're going. So it does that next piece. That next piece is going to be your thesis statement. It gives you a clear, defensible position in a single statement. Okay. With the scoring notes, we definitely addressed that your thesis statement can be multiple sentences as long as they're in close proximity. So that's totally doable. You can. I would challenge you to try to put it in a very complex sentence. Now, in the sophistication area, the complexity of your sentence alone does not give you sophistication, but you're supposed to be writing at a college level. So why not do that? I think it's a great idea. What do you guys think? Does anyone have any questions about the roadmap here? Like, do you see where we're coming from? If you're short on time, straight with the thesis statement. The more that you practice it, though, if you can use your creative opening, your bridge, and your thesis, it's going to help you along the way. Excellent. All right, guys, we've gone through, we've looked at 3 separate model paragraphs. We analyzed what each paragraph did, or what each sentence in that paragraph did in terms of the function of an introduction paragraph. And we looked at the rubric so we would know exactly what they want from us. So through the study of argument, I will be able to analyze the FRQ3 prompt and write an introduction paragraph with a defensible thesis. Do you feel like you can do that? Can you give me a thumbs up if you feel like you've mastered our learning intention? I'm going to let you guys ask some questions here in just a moment. Okay. I want to highlight the most important part, okay? Do not forget to break down the prompt to create your plan. Because when you create that plan and you have a little like brain lapse moment, that plan that you have on your page is going to be what helps you get back on track, okay? So success criteria number 1, I can break down the argument prompt to create a plan. Number 2, I can evaluate the claim I'm expected to create and identify evidence to support the claim. Do you guys remember what your acronym is? What is your mnemonic device to help you remember the evidence? Anybody got it in the chat? My silly little word. REHUGO. Remember REHUGO. So you're going to look at it. Yeah, you got it right there. All your evidence, everything you need. Y'all are so brilliant. Okay. And then that last one is I can write a thorough introduction paragraph with a defensible thesis statement. Do you feel better about your ability to write the introduction paragraph? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, I have a challenge for you. I'm going to challenge you to go back to this particular one. If you have not written it in class, or even if you have, I'm going to challenge you to do it. Do this prompt, think about it, look at your REHUGO, build your writing, and then look at the model essays. So I'm going to send you links. All of this is available on the College Board website. And of course, through, I believe it's available in your student portal for the AP Classroom. And of course, your teacher is probably going to use this in the class because, well, let's face it, we only have two questions from the FRQ3 where they have released the scoring for the current rubric and the samples, and then the scoring notes from the samples. So I would venture to say you're most definitely going to see this at some point this year in your class. Maybe your teacher too will play into the unknown as she introduces the topic. So that said, it takes us through tonight. I do want to make sure that you're following I Think Fiveable. And then of course myself, I am Stephanie Kirk here in East Tennessee, and I am on Twitter at Kirk's Corner. So that's me. That said, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Do you have any questions that you have? One thing that our feedback always says is our participants love the question and answer at the end. So I wanted to build in some time for that. So any questions you have for me, feel free to put it over in the chat. No questions? It doesn't have to be related to argument. It can be anything at all. All right, so the question was, what does REHUGO stand for? So we'll go back and look at that real quick. It's taking a little lag here for a moment. All right, so here's an example of REHUGO, but I want to go back over since your question was, what does it stand for? So here you go. You can take your screenshot. always got to freeze. I love it when I get the little screenshots and I'm like, oh, it picked that face. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? All right. So REHUGO is where you can gather your evidence. So R is reading things that you've read. E would be entertainment and the arts. H is something historical. U is a universal truth. G would be government. I know that history and government are kind of the same. And then observations and experiences as well. So this would be a place for where you can get REHUGO. And then just to kind of let you see it in practice, using that Toby analysis, you can see we've got the thesis statement right here. Reaching for the unknown is what has created the opportunities that continue to positively advance society. And then here, this person didn't have an idea immediately from reading. Entertainment, they went to Frozen. History, you can see Christopher Columbus. The universal truth is that value of reaching for the stars. G would be the government from the founding fathers. And then O is the personal experience and taking the AP course. With REHUGO, you can use it to kind of help you along the way. But this person took it a step further, talking about their introduction. They're going to use these two pieces in the introduction, and then body 1 is going to be focused on that personal experience, and body 2 bringing history and government together. So that's where your REHUGO comes from. All right, next question. What do you think is the best approach towards preparation? So are you doing it self-study? The question is specifically saying for self-study students. My pleasure. All right. Okay. So when you're doing self-study, right now, this year, I really think Fiveable is going to be the way to go for studying. And the reason is because we have AP Lang teachers who, and I realize that this is true of other places, but we're like participating in the webinars and doing the trainings and really trying to bring to you the most up-to-date information. And a lot of books are available out there, and anything that you have that is put out before, say, October, that's not going to be accurate because the rubrics were actually modified and updated and re-released on like September 30th, I think it is. So I would be hesitant to specifically tell you to go and get this book to help you study. Now there is I think it's the Prentice Hall one has come out, and I think it came out like in January, first couple weeks of January, maybe the last week of December. And I've gone through it. Some of the prompts don't necessarily follow through what the stable prompt wording is. But I think that right now it's kind of best guess. So I don't think it's like a terrible idea to use that sort of thing. And you can definitely use that as well. I think that with the self-study, you are going to miss AP Classroom. Some teachers are not using AP Classroom, so it's not like it's a complete loss for anyone. And I do think that there's enough similarity in the test that using an older book might not be the worst thing in the world. The biggest thing that is going to have changed for you is going to be the composition-based questions and the think like a writer part. So follow us. Join us when we're going over those multiple choice questions, and then you can kind of look at that aspect of what is the correct answer and why is it the correct answer, and that's going to help you as well. Insofar as essays, I would encourage you to start with the older ones first. Look at what the prompt says, because good writing is going to be good writing, even though the rubric it offered more than 6 points. And so you can go through and look at those high scoring essays and see what did they do that you can replicate that you can do. 18 and 19, I would definitely write those out by yourself and then try to critique yourself as you go through with those. So I know self-study is challenging, but I feel like it's totally approachable and totally doable. And if you're coming to me on a holiday that maybe you didn't have to go to school, I feel like you're already set up for success. All right. So the question is, would a universal truth count as an example of evidence? Also, would REHUGO be most useful within the body paragraphs or the introduction? Okay, so universal truths can count as an example of evidence. I personally try to kind of steer my students to use those more as like in passing kind of things. Because, for example, with the one that's here on the board, we can reference frozen in passing, because that's a big thing right now. If you haven't seen it, you have heard the songs on the radio, but I wouldn't do an entire body paragraph on Elsa's journey into the unknown and, finding out who she is in this foreign land, because it's a cartoon, and that those things aren't really going to happen in real life. So you can use them use them in passing. Now, this concept of reaching for the stars, that's another example of in passing, you can use it. Now, this particular person was able to connect that idea of reaching for the stars to right down here. Oops, sorry about it. I didn't mean to make that part pop up. But that challenger speech where Reagan comes out and says, you have to reach for the stars, because even if you fall short, you can still kind of recoup that loss. This particular essay actually did go on to talk about that concept of, like, even if you reach for the stars, you might land at the moon. And so that universal truth was not used as evidence as a full body paragraph, but it was almost used in passing to help funnel the ideas from that generalized topic down to the thesis statement. And then those universal truths can also be used in that bottom aspect when you are kind of trying to go back to that big idea as well. So is it most useful within body paragraphs? I'm going to say, okay, so both. This person planned it out and used it to identify elements that would work for the introduction, but also for the body paragraph. And that's what I think is beautiful about this, because in your introduction, as you funnel it down, you get into your body paragraphs where your evidence is going to be. And this person is going to develop this idea, the personal experience of taking an AP course. That's going to be developed into an entire paragraph, like the unknown opportunities of getting that college credit and being able to help set their future up for success, but the fear that they have of failure. And then they actually take it into, this person, when writing it, actually took it into, even if they just get a 2, that's still a lesson learned, because they transitioned from the 10th grade class to a college level class. And even though they didn't get college credit, they were able to say, hey, I grew, I produced growth, and I'm so proud of myself. So then right here, in terms of the body paragraphs, you can see body paragraph number 2 is going to start with Christopher Columbus and the founding fathers. And that evidence is going to be developed into the evidence and commentary that proves the value of exploring the unknown, that it is absolutely worth doing because it has created the opportunities that continue to advance society. So, all right, next question. Do I have another one? My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. Okay. I guess that said, we're going to be ready to wrap it up. Okay. So let's go back over our learning intention. I'm going to make sure that you guys do get this, so you'll be able to see each of these pieces in the presentation, so that you'll get that links to that in your follow-up email, so you'll be able to view it. Of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at any time. It's at Kirk's Corner. You can send me a direct message. Give me a little @ on Twitter. Come up with what you got. Remember to have your opening and your bridge and then your thesis statement. Breaking it all down, and use REHUGO to set you up for success. Okay. Final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Excellent. So you guys join us next week. We're going to look at argument, the body paragraphs. So you'll get a little bit more of a detail there, kind of what it looks like, and how in the world does my evidence and commentary get me that 4? Hey, you guys, have a fantastic night. I am super excited to have been with you. Have a great night. Bye.